All right, Brian, how's it going?
Good. Good to be here again. Good stuff.
Excellent. Yeah, me too. Happy to be here. So just getting this May podcast going kind of late. That's okay. We're busy guys. Better late than never though. We still got a day left in the month.
Lots going on. Yeah.
Yeah, lots going on.
Job security.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Fortunately and unfortunately sometimes, however the case may be. So, although, hello everybody. In today's show, we're going to discuss a few of the latest cyber news and stats, news stories and stats, and then we're going to wrap up our series on the CIS controls as we kind of go through and cover the framework at a high level from top to bottom. And just remember to please subscribe to our channel, like the channel, share this video with anyone you think you can benefit from the content. And I guess with that, let's get into it. Let's see. All right. A few things we're going to talk about. So one is a ransomware surge. Kind of been doing some digging through stats, mainly from 2024 and even 2023 as we kind of get into, kind of the second entering the second half of 2025. A lot of data out there, definitely pointing to a surge in ransomware. We'll talk about some AI-driven threats, and then we'll talk about, are these are the batteries that are being sold into U.S. markets for electric vehicles and the grid, are they cyber risks? This is something that kind of came across my news stack earlier this month, and I started reading about it, and I was like, okay, never even thought about that, but we'll see.
Definitely a part of my world, and yes, it's a risk.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Brian. Okay. So, gosh, this is big on the screen. But anyway, so we kind of talk about some of the stats. So 2023, 2024 stats are in. Of course, we're, kind of looking ahead as to what we might see this year. But, clearly things are on the rise in terms of threats, and specifically, in a lot of cases, ransomware across the healthcare, education, government, and critical infrastructure segments of our world. Ransomware attacks continue to surge. I think that it's important to kind of point out, like, there's this escalating threat landscape. Just the first quarter of 2025, according to some sources, there was a 45% surge in ransomware attacks, and 95% of those involve data exfil, and basically this is sort of signaling a shift to multi-extortion tactics. And this has been building for a number of years, the multi-extortion tactics. And I think the bad guys are just going to continue to try to modify and hone their approach, because they want to make sure to get paid in the end. Part of that is targeting the right industries. So we see healthcare being particularly vulnerable. And I think, a couple of the reasons are, well, number one, the bad guys understand the criticality of the operations, right? In a healthcare environment, you've got to have continuous operations. You can't afford for your systems to go down because people's lives and health are at risk. And then, of course, there's the data that's very valuable. And both those things kind of give the bad guys leverage. And, healthcare is going to continue to be a target.
Yeah. And
I would say, yeah, go ahead.
On the critical infrastructure side, the increase on the ransomware piece is definitely on an uptick. The latter half of 2024 for electric utilities, they had like a 60% increase on ransomware attacks, and also focused increase on the operational technology side. So the bad actors are starting to understand that electric utilities, no matter how big or small they are using the same technology, same infrastructure for substations, microgrids, all these various resources. And they're understanding who the manufacturers are, who the distributors are, and they're learning what the vulnerabilities are, and they're going after it because they're seeing that the cybersecurity around those assets is not as mature as it needs to be. So the jump has been on that. And then what you mentioned about the repetition around hitting hitting a place more than once. We're seeing that across the utility space. Healthcare, I know, has seen it. Education has seen it, where they'll go through a ransomware event, they'll think they've recovered, come back and they'll hit them, turn around and hit them again. That seems to be a very current methodology, what they like to do to hit a place more than once.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And this isn't going to slow down, I don't think. And we're just going to continue to see these threats. And that's going to drive really the need for the good guys to level up in terms of our own use of advanced technologies like AI and machine learning. And we're clearly going to need to work diligently to build and sustain and consistently improve the prevention, detection, and response capabilities that we have. So um, moving on, let's talk a little bit about some of the AI powered cyber threats. Before the show, we're just kind of chatting, and you were talking about some of the things that you're seeing, and with regard to voice cloning and phishing and those sorts of things. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for everybody?
Yeah, the FBI put out a public service announcement and they were focusing on some government officials, but the malicious actors sent text messages, AI generated voice messages, known as smishing and vishing, that claim to come from a senior U.S. official in an effort to establish rapport before gaining access to personal accounts. So
Mm-hmm.
they're able to easily get snippets and examples of voice and images, and they can easily recreate in an AI setting a video or a voice message to reach out and try to do that. And we're seeing this more on the executive level,
Yep.
where someone will pretend to be a vendor or someone they're working with, get tied into a CEO or a CFO, someone in that C-suite, have a phone call enough to get a voice sample. The pictures are easy enough to get offline for just about anybody now. And then
Yep.
they can put that in these tools, make it, send a voicemail, a text message. And we're doing end user training on our end to try to train everybody to be aware of this and vet abnormal requests, even if it appear they think it's coming from someone. So now we're saying, even if it's a voice message, call on their known good number to verify something if they're asking for a payment or some kind of sensitive information. Verify that through a known good channel before completion of that kind of request to verify. And it's going to get harder and harder to vet these things. We're going to have to be very vigilant about having a process in place where you're vetting what you're doing, even if it seems like it's a video call from your CEO, your CFO. Get off of that call and then call them on their known direct good line just to verify, and have that. Once that becomes a part of it may seem weird initially, but as that becomes a part of the culture and a solid
Yep.
cybersecurity practice, then everyone will kind of slide into that habit to do that. I think that's something we're going to have to do.
Yeah. No, I agree, and it's fascinating and at the same time concerning.
Yeah.
And then we were talking before the show. We are also talking about some of the other social engineering type attacks that we're going to continue to see. And I think what you just mentioned, it's going to become one of those parts of the training and the awareness, because it's going to become more and more prevalent. And even though we do the training and even though we put controls in place, none of those controls are ever like a silver bullet. And that's why people need to understand that, as you're considering your information security program at your organization, layered defense is absolutely mission critical in order, to the success of the program as a whole. And I'll just bring up an incident that we worked earlier this week for a customer of ours who is they're a financial, sort of like a fintech company, and their CEO had received a spear phishing email. And the email was designed to look like it came from their cloud-based VoIP vendor. And it basically had a link in the body of the email for him to go click and check his voicemail. As it happens, their Microsoft tenant is integrated with their VoIP platform. So when he clicked the link, it was expected for him to go ahead and enter his Microsoft credentials. And when he did, what was going on behind the scenes is the attacker sent that same set of credentials to legitimate Microsoft servers, thereby triggering the multi-factor prompt on his phone. So he's putting the 2 digits in, and at that point, the session's now active. The bad guys automatically, with some code and infrastructure, start the process of logging into his account, creating some rules in his mailbox, and then of course the next thing they want to do is fish everybody in his address book. So luckily, we this particular customer is covered by our security orchestration automation and the playbooks and things like that. So this all happened really quick over just a course, a matter of a few minutes, and the attack was observed. It was correlated, everything, his location, all that kind of stuff was correlated, user agent, everything. And his account was automatically disabled and all the sessions were revoked. So the damage was contained, but it just kind of goes to show that the use of AI to make really convincing emails, to make convincing cloned websites, to even just as a matter of just sort of scaling the ability of the bad guys to get these campaigns out. All that stuff is happening, and it happens. This is a small business. I mean, they're a pretty small company, and so it happens at small businesses, and it happens at businesses of all sizes. So I think we're going to continue to see this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's getting more and more pervasive. The size of the company makes no difference. And that automated response piece that you talked about that you have set up with that customer, it's going to be critical for everyone to have something like that in place, and to where you've got that automated piece that will lock down the machine, segregate it, take it offline, secure it, and then notify. Because the days of maybe getting an initial alert and then going in and researching and look at that old pattern of responding is antiquated to this point, and it's still the way a lot of people are operating, to where they're getting this alert. But the automated piece now, to where you've got the tooling built in to where it sees it as malicious, secures that endpoint, cuts it offline, locks it all down, segregates it. It immediately stops that from spreading and causing that larger problem. And that type of, automated response piece is going to be critical for everybody to have it, as we kind of move forward. With as pervasive as the AI attacking is getting, the automated response is going to have to be there to help counter that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, clearly big stuff happening. Let's talk about these Chinese batteries. I mean, I don't remember the name, and I don't know that I took a name of the notes, a name of the companies in my notes, but there's a couple of, I think two, primary suppliers of batteries from China to markets outside of China, and we're talking about us. So, I was reading through, I think I found this on Security Week a couple of weeks ago, and I was just kind of looking through my news, and I was reading through this, and I was like, man, this is both fascinating. It's, for me, novel, because I didn't even consider this. And it's also really scary, because we're talking about implications that are as maybe, kind of low end or benign as like knowing where you might go, like in your Tesla or whatever car you're driving, to being able to disrupt our grid, and everything in between. So what are your thoughts on this?
So what I'll go into is publicly available. I'll keep it in that realm at the moment currently. So one of the top main producers and the primary supplier for Tesla is a company called CATL, CATL. That was China-based company that has made, and I believe still does make, the vast majority of the Tesla car batteries. For those that have the Tesla Powerwall, that's typically, as far as I know, a CATL product. And then the batteries that are used for bulk electric storage that's attached to a grid, where you've got the large solar facilities that go to those batteries, and that's used as a backup or to help cover peak demand. Those things, a lot of those across the entire country, no matter what utility you're tied into, are using CATL batteries. So it was on the news a good while back at this point. I believe it was at Camp Lejeune. There was a large piece of CATL batteries. It was at the military installation. They pulled those out for reasons of national security. That was done because when they realized this manufacturer's course, it's out of China. There's concern about components inside the battery as a whole with the ability to communicate back out to China. Very realistic thought process, realistic threat. And there's national labs and things that have been plugged in to research that and understand how to secure that and understand what the communication methods are, what are inside of those batteries.
Mm-hmm.
And, outside of the tracking things for the something in a Tesla vehicle from someone's travel patterns and what they're doing, but with the grid, there's the concerns of being able to turn the battery on or off or drain it quickly or have some type of impact to how it's helping with resilience and reliability from a backup perspective on the grid. So,
So, Brian, I don't know a lot about how that stuff works from a battery perspective, but I mean, in your estimation, is there, I've, you know, batteries I think can experience failures that can, just be environmental, or they can be induced by software, i.e., like from a hacker, right? That can actually cause a certain kind of failure, which can actually cause the battery to catch fire
yep,
or to explode, or I
yeah,
mean, I think even maybe those kinds of things are within the scope of what we're talking about here,
yeah,
as well as
absolutely.
disruptions.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's where there's, because we we're talking about cybersecurity for an operational technology environment versus the normal business side. The network monitoring piece is a challenge, and then there's very limited tools. So, like one of the top recommendations for securing an OT environment is network segmentation. So,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that as things are connected via networks, that there's segmentation is that if a specific site is compromised, the bad actors can't move laterally to another site, or they can't move anywhere else on the grid if they happen to compromise a specific site.
Yeah.
That's the big practice that a lot of utilities are really focusing on first, to make sure that they're getting that segmentation in place and secure that if a site is breached. But the batteries, there is ongoing work on understanding what the threats are and how to secure that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an ever evolving piece. And it's like most people wouldn't even think of that being a problem, but
I had no clue until I read this a couple of weeks ago. And you mentioned the Camp Lejeune thing, and I thought that was even fascinating too, before we move on to the CIS controls. I mean, geez, that I think what they were citing was, just among other things, was like if the batteries and the little processors and whatnot that are inside the battery system can send back information to an adversary, well, what's to stop them from sending back, information that tells them a lot of American military stuff just turned on, like what's
yeah,
going on, and it's turned on here in this part of the country or here in this part of the world, and now they get a little bit of a more insight into what we might be doing in terms of military operations, so among other things. So hey, thanks for kind of sharing that with the audience. That's fascinating. I'm supposed to ask you a question here. And the question is, as we kind of get into the CIS controls and kind of go through a quick high level. So just to kind of warn everybody, there's a lot of slides coming up. We're going to just go through them really quick because we're trying to keep these podcasts somewhat short. But before we kind of go into the slides themselves, I think it's important to understand, and I'm going to ask you this question, Brian, like what are the most important problems that can be solved by implementing a framework like the CIS controls?
right. So you don't know what you don't know. And that's one of the areas that a framework can provide, whether we're talking about Center for Internet Security 18 standards, the NIST cybersecurity framework, or even if you go back to the ISO 27001, but the framework gives you the foundation for your cybersecurity program. And when you go through a framework, it's telling you what to look at, and it will help you identify what you are not doing. There's talking about having a cybersecurity policy in place, policy and guidelines. Is that an issue for you? Talks about network monitoring, asset inventory for hardware, for software. There's touch points on governance. If you're in a heavy regulated environment, it helps you meet the things for regulatory requirements for control. So like with HIPAA for healthcare, these kind of things, it guide you through what you need to secure. It won't tell you how to do it, how to actually work that specific issue, but it will point you to it so you know what to do and keep going. And then I think one of the other important pieces of having a framework and following it is it will help you mature the environment as you go, because your network's going to change, the threats are going to change, threat methodologies are going to change, the technology that you're using, how you and your employees interact with technology is going to change. You need to understand this will help you build your security around it. And hopefully in an ideal scenario, it's you're being proactive and you're building a proactive cybersecurity program and not just reactive. Using this in a reactive fashion would be painful. So it's
Mm-hmm.
taking that proactive approach. The framework is going to guide you through that. And with the CIS here with the implementation group, the CIS is an easier framework to work with because it gives you that implementation group. So helps you kind of go and build. The NIST doesn't give you that kind of a guidance per se
Yeah.
to help you implement. So that's the benefit there and having that implementation guidance piece so you can build it gradually, because it's the worst thing a company can do is think of it as a checkbox. So you're checking and you're done. So you would, as you get stuff going, you actually want to come back, ideally on an annual basis, and do an internal cybersecurity self-assessment using your framework as your guidance, making
Mm-hmm.
sure that what you had in place is still there. Is it still valid? Can you mature and change based on what you're doing and keep going and going and going? So it's a never ending piece. You don't have an end goal with cybersecurity. You don't reach a finish line. So it's that guides you through that journey.
Awesome. Yeah, couldn't have said it better. Well, I tell you what, let's go ahead and start digging into the slide deck. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the control groups, kind of go through that as a high level. I do think that your point is 100%, spot on with regard to one of the benefits of CIS is the fact that they've broken it up into groups, making it easy to kind of get started. Obviously, the groups are basically like sort of beginner, mid-tier and advanced as you go from 1 to 3. If we kind of talk about the groups at a high level, the first, the 3 groups, the first group is basically your essential controls. I mean, these are things that every organization should have in place as just sort of your basic technology and cybersecurity controls that help you get started, with a security program that's ultimately designed to protect your company, your organization from financial, legal, reputational, operational, and other types of risks. All the bottom line is like, listen, we want to keep the lights on. We want to keep the doors open. We want to keep people employed. We want to keep our customers, our vendors, our partners, and all those people, supplied with whatever it is our mission is to supply them with. And this helps you get started with doing that.
Yep. Yep, absolutely.
So group 2, right? A little more intermediate controls, things that organizations, I still think, a lot of the controls in group 2, I think they're still essential. How are you going to get by as a business without doing some of group 2? I don't care what business you're in. I mean, am I wrong?
No, and there's a lot of thought too around, we're a small company. We only have a handful of people. You don't necessarily have dedicated personnel staff for cybersecurity. And there's so many varying options now between managed service like you guys. There is free tooling available to get
Mm-hmm.
people started. CISA is a good site to go to find that stuff. And you can hit these things even up through like this medium tier,
Yeah.
have things in place and going without spending a ton of money per se. You want to make sure that you understand what your critical assets are, what the key part of your infrastructure is, that
Yep.
if that is impacted or taken down, it puts you out of business. So what's the best you can do to to reasonably secure that? There's no
Mm-hmm.
such thing as 100% secure if it's touching the outside world. But what's the most realistic way to secure that asset, and keep being mindful of that going forward? And like I said, with the way the managed service space has gone, it went from where only really big supersized companies could afford a managed
Yeah.
service. Now there's more folks that that are looking at catering to small to mid-sized companies that can help with this stuff, at least if nothing else, from an initial and then touch points along the way. There's more than one way to go about it.
Yeah, I agree. And, I'll toot our own horn just a little bit, and our market is, for the most part, SMBs. And one of the things that we work hard to do is to provide, hyper advanced type security solutions that are affordable for SMBs and give them, the same types of prevention, detection, response, compliance capabilities that large organizations, like you said, only they used to be able to afford these kind of things. And then to touch on one more thing before we switch slides that you mentioned earlier, there's actually government subsidized and free tooling out there. There's the open source tools, right? Security Onion, Suricata Snort, and some of the other tools that are out there that, if you, for the DIY folks who either just want to, or they have the internal resources, or for whatever other reason want to leverage some of these tools, they're out there. But then there's government programs, and I don't remember the name of it. Maybe you do, but there's and it may be sponsored or in part by the NSA, but one of our partners, Horizon 3, is actually now working with the government to facilitate doing the pen testing that organizations, especially the small businesses who are trying to accomplish CMMC version 2, which is extremely onerous and very expensive and time consuming. So you can actually go get free tools, free services through some of the government agencies to help you get started and even solve some of the more difficult problems.
Yeah, that's good stuff. The CISA, Homeland Security, those sites would have that. I don't remember the name, but I know what you're talking about, though. But that's, yeah, I would think either Homeland Security or the CISA would point folks to that.
Yeah. And then group 3, just more, what you would call more advanced controls. Even though, when we look at some of these things, I think by and large, once you start kind of getting into this, things like threat intel, automated response, continuous assessment, those sorts of things, those actually are becoming sort of table stakes controls to have in many of the solutions that at least we're providing for our clients. And I know, you guys as well, and a lot of other customers, you're going to want to have some of these capabilities at a minimum, right, in the solutions that you're subscribing to, whether it's through a managed security provider or something you're, buying and implementing internally.
Yeah.
I just dropped a screenshot of a snippet of the workbook for the CIS controls, just so people, maybe people are like, what are we even talking about? Like, and I, as a visual person, like, what does it actually look like? Well, it could be a spreadsheet. I just downloaded this today just to have this from the CIS website, right?
Yeah, and to me, it's phenomenal that this is free. You don't have to pay to get this. You put in your email, and you can go in and download this workbook. You can see at the far right side of that, it's got IG 1, 2, 3. It's got the implementation groups checked off. You can go this. So if a small organization could take this, walk through this, look at you've got those 2 categories there: inventory control of enterprise assets and then software assets. So, and it keeps going all the way down, gives you the subcategories, and breaks it down: identify, respond, detect, identify, detect. So it lays it all out for you, and it's easy to follow. Like I said, this is free, and you've got this to go by, and you have this guidance to use as your framework. So yeah, it works out great.
It's fantastic. And in case the audience doesn't know, many people and organizations contribute to the design, the development, the maintenance, the upkeep, the enhancements, and the ongoing evolution of the CIS controls. What you're getting is very high quality.
Yeah. And it follows the NIST as well. So they added the governance component to NIST, CIS updated and added governance.
Right.
So it's following that as well.
Yeah. All right. So this is the part where we've got a lot of slides, and I don't want to bore everybody by going through, by spending too much time on all this stuff. Maybe it's not boring to us, but we've got a couple that kind of are at the very beginning, but then we're just going to kind of categorically kind of talk through some of these. So we've kind of already mentioned the control 1, right? If you don't know what's in your environment, that's your probably your first problem, right? We've talked about in the previous podcast, not knowing what's in your environment means you can't patch it, You can't update it. You can't protect it against vulnerabilities that are things like, hey, I need to update my router firmware because, APTs are taking over my router or routers like this. Then, that's why that's a foundational control. Same thing with the other, some of these other kind of basic controls, 2 through 4, they're foundational security. You got to understand what software is in your environment, right? Know thyself. I think that was like way back in the 90s or early 2000s, I guess, when I was getting into the field and I was doing some SANS training. I can't remember the instructors. They were all great. But know thyself. They had a bunch of these little mantras, right? Know thyself is important.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So 3 through 6, right? We want to build on that foundation. Things like data protection, making sure you're encrypting your data, secure configurations, like we talked about last month. I mean, some quick, grokking and Googling, you can get the default credentials for pretty much any device that's out there, your Cisco routers, whatever they might be. So, all that stuff is sort of important.
Yeah. Now, all these things are touching on if anybody's in an industry or situation where they're trying to get cyber insurance, like with Control 5, it talks about enforce MFA for all privileged and external facing accounts. And that's one of the key things every cyber insurance questionnaire has on it, is asks about MFA. So this walks you through, and you're going to if you hit the core items, you're going to meet those to help be able to try to get a competitive cyber insurance rate, depending on what you're looking at. But this all touches on all that. And those providers are looking at these things as well.
Excellent thing to bring up. And so, right. Yeah. I mean, we get customers asking us, hey, can you help us fill out this insurance renewal? Our renewal question. They've got all these questions, are we doing all these things? And they're definitely asking. So yeah, good point.
I think the one that we do every year is like 180 questions.
Right.
It's like going to the GI doctor or a dentist and they just dig in. It's terrible. It's just brutal.
Yeah. Sorry for the dentist out there and the GI doctors, but he's right. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. All right. So 7 through 10. So we're talking about more advanced defense layers. I mean, continuous vulnerability management. I would say that's probably true, more of an advanced thing. And the reason for that really, I think, comes down to barrier to entry from a cost perspective, right? I mean, this isn't cheap, right? I mean, when you really want to do vulnerability management, I mean, somebody's going to spend some hours doing it, because it's not just a, fire and forget thing that you run every month or every quarter or whatever your cadence is. There's actually a fair amount of work that goes into doing this and doing it correctly,
Yeah. And there's, if you're looking at, a SIM, security incident event monitoring, if you're running one in house or if you're using a managed service with a SOC SIM combo, whatever. So like with us, where we're running a SIM, we've got a vendor that helps us do that because it can get noisy, and keeping that configured down and handling that log management piece well is critical. And there's more than one way to handle the vulnerability management piece. Like you mentioned Horizon AI, that's a critical aspect for us, and it's been a just ridiculously beneficial tool. And there's so many different things out there to help you consolidate what you're doing to accomplish a task. So
I agree. I mean, Horizon 3's product has been a game changer for a lot of our customers. It's been a game changer for us as a managed services provider, because now we're able to use it to rapidly identify what really matters, which are the vulnerabilities that can be exploited and cause the major problems. I will say, though, that there are environments where, your traditional vulnerability management tools like Nessus or Qualys or Rapid7 or something, I mean, all those tools are still in use. I mean, clearly they're still in use, and there's nothing necessarily, quote, wrong with those tools. It's just that there's a lot of results, and if you don't have the manpower, the skills, and all those kinds of things to digest the reports and figure out what's true and false and all the other things that kind of go into it, it's daunting. I think a lot of times, unfortunately, and this isn't just for vulnerability management, what companies find is they start to try to do this on their own, and maybe without the right resources internally, and they buy something that's very expensive and they realize, oh, dang, I can't use this thing effectively. And it just ends up being a waste of time and resources. So, and I'm not, not advocating against doing it. I'm just saying that, that can happen.
Yeah, just because you have a tool doesn't mean you're using it effectively, doesn't mean it's
Right.
benefiting you, and doesn't mean it's actually driving what you actually need for the business need to cover that. So it's getting the right tool that's you're able to use effectively is huge.
Yeah, true. So, I mean, looking at things like network defense, network monitoring, security awareness, which I think is a basic thing these days, controlled access, wireless access control. I mean, again, I think there's sort of a mix between more like I don't know, your upper market type stuff going on here versus your everybody ought to be doing it type controls.
Yeah, the security awareness piece to me is one of the most important parts of anybody's cybersecurity program. Doesn't matter what it is, because the number one consistent weak link, no matter what the one thing you cannot engineer out, you cannot remove, is that human factor. So training your end users on what the threats are, how to look for phishing, being aware of social
Mm-hmm.
engineering, doing that is critical. And there's so many that will do something once a year, and they'll do something for the sake of doing it. Where we do it quarterly, it's changed very regularly. What we're doing, I keep things to where it's a current kind of hot topic areas. We're adjusting our program. We're modifying the awareness training, but we do it as engaging. We do face to face in person as well as the online kind of with Teams meetings and stuff as well.
Yeah.
But and we do it quarterly, and it's had an impact. And doing something like that on a regular basis, we do lunch and learns on occasion, that kind of thing. But keeping that ongoing and then having that senior leadership buy-in to push the engagement for the awareness training makes a huge difference.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. There's just no way around it. That's totally a fact. Okay, so I last slide, next to last slide, I think. So kind of like the last couple of different control group, or not control groups, but few control categories here. Some of these may not apply to everybody, like the AppSec stuff. I mean, if you're developing software within your organization, if that's what you do, that this will be important. Incident response management, again, I mean, a lot of companies, probably outsourcing this to a specialist company, MSSP or something, but also clearly important. I mean, the reality is without the right staff, the right tools, expertise, and experience in the day-to-day kind of like battle hardened, experience, right? Your average company is not really going to know what to do at 3 a.m. when they're sleepy and they get woken up by some alert and they got to figure out what just happened. Because like if you're trying to do that OODA loop, right? Observe, orient, decide, and act, and you haven't even had your coffee and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, it's just you and Larry in the IT department.
Yeah.
You're going to have a rough morning and a rough week. That's what I think.
Yeah, this is very, very true. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then pen testing. I mean, like we said earlier, there are some tools out there that are making that even making it easier for companies to actually subscribe, buy, and run it themselves. Or sometimes you need to pay somebody to bring in expertise to do some of those things yourselves, do some of those things for you rather. But yeah, I mean, so overall, the CIS controls, I mean, it's huge. I do really appreciate all your expertise as we kind of gone through this month and last month. I am hoping this has been valuable for the listeners. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to get in touch with us. We'd love to help you kind of understand more. Even if it's just one of those freebie quick calls where you kind of point you in the right direction. We're always happy to do that sort of thing. So Brian, thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And are we doing one next month? I know we've got some travel. It's June. I don't know if it's June or July, but we'll try to fit one in and make sure that we get a June one out. So
work it out. Yeah. Sounds like a plan, man. I appreciate it.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
And hope everybody has a good weekend ahead.